The US could have more forces in Syria and Iraq than it admits. That's according to data provided by the US Defense Manpower Data Center. Its latest report suggests there are almost 2,000 US soldiers in Syria, while the official figure is just over 500. And for Iraq, the number provided by the Manpower Data Center is more than 3,000 higher than the Pentagon's. Well, however, the Pentagon itself says the numbers provided in the report were initial estimates for Syria and Iraq, including short-term deployments and the rotation of the troops. Well, let's discuss this further now. Let's cross live to our guest, Middle East analyst Ali Risk. Thank you for joining us on the programme, Mr. Risk. Now, what could explain this discrepancy in the numbers?
Well, I think maybe, it's quite possible that the official numbers, or the real numbers, sorry, are higher than the official numbers which are given by the US officials. You have to bear in mind that before the killing of 4 US troops in Niger, many people didn't know, even probably most of the world didn't know, that the US actually had troops in that country. So bearing that in mind, one wouldn't be surprised to know that the real numbers of US troops in Iraq, in Syria, elsewhere in the Middle East would be higher, given the fact that this US troop presence in Africa, Niger and elsewhere in the African continent wasn't known. What also maybe could make it quite possible that the real numbers are higher than what is being announced is the fact that you have generals, many of President Trump's closest associates, the members of his cabinet, they are military men. General McMaster, General James Mattis, James Kelly, etc. And so they would be more prone to send a high number of military personnel abroad. At the same time, the US public probably wouldn't receive that kind of deployment very well, would probably raise its objections, which would require from the Trump administration to maybe hide these facts and to increase troop presence without actually announcing it. So for all of these factors, it could be quite possible that we indeed do have larger numbers than what is being heard about. Right,
and this wouldn't be the first time the US has been unclear about its troop numbers in Iraq and Syria, would it? Let's just remind ourselves of a previous soundbite.
We have approximately 55,000 Syrian, or 5,000. I'm sorry. I think it's a little over 4,000 U.S. troops in Syria right now that are supporting efforts against Daesh and supporting the SDF.
That was Major General James Jarrard there, getting a little confused. Why does the Pentagon apparently want to give the impression that it has fewer troops than it really does in the region?
Well, as I said, I think it's related to what I would call the post-Iraqi war and Afghani war syndrome. It's similar than the situation we had in the aftermath of the war on Vietnam, the American war on Vietnam. The same thing, the American public is exhausted. It's against any increase in troop presence. And so I think that the Pentagon is very intent on keeping this message that it has a low level of troop presence in order not to lead to an outburst or an outcry from the American public, which, as I said, is very war-weary and would be very much or would very much object to some increased American presence. So this is the current state of the American public. So I think it's mostly related to the American public and the fact that it's exhausted with these wars. At the same time, we do have generals, a lot of generals who want to increase or who want to would be more prone to pursuing military solutions or having a military build-up in the foreign countries.
I see. So what about, we're hopefully nearing the end of the end of Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. When the battle against the terror group is over, do you expect the US to leave a certain number of troops in these two countries?
Yes, I do. And in fact, Secretary of Defense James Mattis, he even said that very clearly. He said that after ISIS is defeated, that doesn't mean we're going to pack and leave. He indeed said we won't pack and leave after ISIS is defeated. So America will maintain its presence. I think that, you know, there's a clear, there are voices, I would say, inside the US administration, including Mattis himself and some others, who basically say that the US can't leave Syria under quote-unquote Russian-Iranian presence, because that would mean that the US has lost the game to Russia and to Iran. And so if you take that mindset of some American officials into consideration, it is indeed very far-fetched that America will pack and leave, as Mattis said, after ISIS is defeated. Maybe Trump himself personally would like to do that, but I doubt that he'll be able to confront the pressures from the establishment, and particularly from his military advisors like Mattis and like McMaster.